Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Roger Bjork. I'm with Dell, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing for our global Bring Your Own initiatives that we have. And you know, when asked what I do, a lot of it is like this. And I talk to our customers about embracing mobility as a business tool. You heard a lot of that alluded to earlier in the keynote kickoffs this morning of using mobility to help your business, your agency, your relationship with your customers and your own employees be cheaper, better, faster. And I'm going to talk about, one of the aspects of this is, balancing, the security of your information with the freedom of your users, either employees or customers, to use the devices that they choose to use for a broad set of reasons. Now, the industry certainly is changing rapidly, and we're going to go over several ways that this is happening, and it's not just technology. And I want to reemphasize some of the points that were made earlier. This is not only a technology discussion, right? It has to do with the culture of your organization. It has to do with how you're recruiting new talent. It has to do with policies that you're going to set and the way you want to interact with your customers and your employees in the various ways that they access data and applications to do something with information that you have. Some key trends, of course, the device explosion. I was at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona last month, and it was interesting about how many new platforms there are coming. I've been doing this role for about 3 or 4 years now, and then you had, Apple was coming on the scene, you had Android coming on, you had Nokia, you had Microsoft, Intel was toying with some operating systems and platforms, and it sort of, died back to primarily, iOS, Android, and what Microsoft was going to do with Windows 8, right? Well, now you have companies like Firefox introducing new software platforms to run on mobile devices. You have Google in hardware business. So this new types of devices and new form factors and new platforms is starting to grow again. This wild, wild west of chaos out here, can create lots of issues for people in this room who have to deal with that. This role of anytime, anywhere connectivity, not only your customers, as you heard this morning in the keynote, who want to access your services from anytime, anywhere, but your employees too, who may need to flex on their work, who may need to check their email in the morning or late at night. A lot of people keep that little shiny device, next to their bedside. It's their alarm clock, but they also check email, and they always have current information, right? So it's about access to this information. And then the benefit, the promise of all this, right, is productivity. We did our own study and found that employees who were enabled with mobile devices were actually working about 240 more hours a year, which, it's 12.5%, right? It's fairly significant. And it was by their choice. And so rarely do you have, these opportunities to have, more productivity and happier employees and IT benefits all at the same time converging. It's really a wonderful situation. What we clearly know is that the status quo is no longer valid, right? It's not a cookie cutter world. It's not everybody gets a Wintel platform to do their work and they come to a place and they work. They're working many places. Many of the consulting firms will tell you that the average number of devices per employee is already close to 3 and probably is moving over 5 over the next 5 years, right, of types of electronic devices they interact with every single day. So the impact to you about, will my network handle that? How do I make sure the right device is accessing the right data? It's authorized by the right set of people. All those become very critical now because you don't have that fully managed corporate or agency provided and locked down machine is the only way of doing work. And by the way, that workspace could be in the Starbucks. We seem to be picking on 7-Eleven a lot today, so it could be over there. Or it could be when you're commuting or when, on the train, et cetera, right? You can work a lot of different places to become more productive as an employee as well. Lots of trends that are driving this. Social media. You should not underestimate this. So what's also changing is not just the little pieces of glass that people have in their pocket or their purse that they want to use, but the way that they want to work. My daughter she graduated from the university last year, and that generation of student has had the internet their entire life. Right? It's the first group of new potential employees, new customers of yours that have had a digital world their entire life. And the way they interact and work is different. It's very social. Here's an example. We took a vacation in Puerto Rico. So in San Juan, and we'd gone up into the rainforest and had a great time trekking around, right? We're coming back into San Juan, and it's lunchtime, so we're hungry. So I'm driving, so everybody else has their phone out, and they're looking on, your social media of choice, right, to figure out what restaurant you want to go to and what the rating was, etc. And my daughter looked up in all earnestness to my wife and I and asked, "How did you ever eat before smartphones?" Right? I mean, it's just, her world is different from the world that my wife and I grew up in. And they're bringing that into the workplace. So how are they collaborating? How are you running meetings, right? All this enabled by this new technology. And it's much broader topic than I want to use that iPhone to get my email. If you only think that's what it is, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's a much broader topic, and the impacts are much broader. So social media is hugely important. This blurring of work and home, the ability to have current information no matter where you are, the ability to support a flexible work-life balance and attend the kids' soccer game, but continue your work perhaps later in the afternoon. The ability to provide a service to one of your customers at 2 a.m. instead of 9 to 4. All those are critical, and it's merging together. The new mobile devices we've talked about, new form factors from small to large. Imagine too, sitting back in your big lazy boy with that 90-inch TV screen, right? Why not, right? It's just another device. It's just another way to interact with data in a system through an application. And then, and this is bringing about, changing employee expectations of IT, right? IT now is much, much more a partner in the business. Yes, in IT we still have to define policy and implement policy and govern and track and manage technology, but it's much more of being a business partner with the different groups that you work and interact with. Some key changes, I don't know how much you're seeing it today, but in addition, we spent a lot of time talking about smartphones and tablets as bring your own, but PCs are making an inroad here too. We did a recent study with Gartner, and upwards of 24% of companies and agencies are experimenting now with bring your own PC. Right, same idea, similar concept. People tend to be very passionate about the electronic devices they like to work on. And why not, right? If you can enable that employee to be happier, more productive, and still maintain the type of environment that you need and provide them the applications and a secure access the way you need to, it's perfect, right? It's a perfect storm coming up. By and large, the type of phone that someone's carrying in their pocket is chosen by that person today, whether it be a BYO or even many companies and agencies are doing choose your own, where they'll offer a variety, but then the employee gets to pick one of 6, not just here's the gray one, please use that, right? So a lot of changes in the business model happening, from a financial responsibility, from a policy standpoint of how you have to deal with that. Lots of good questions and even some turmoil in this space. So I want to talk about it in the context of three different stakeholders here. First of all, the end user, who is clearly advocating for device choice, the passion, the type of use, the services that they want to pay for. How are you delivering software and applications? You know, I didn't coin this, but I really like it, is, you know, the app is the new endpoint, right? It's really about how you're accessing the data, and those are usually presented to an end user through an app, right? So how is that now the new endpoint that you have to be concerned and manage and govern? What kind of support is that person going to get? Where maybe 10 years ago, there was an IT department who provided them full support when it broke, when the battery was down, when they needed some peripherals, they had a way to go get support. Now if it's BYO, what do you do, right? You have a little bit of concern there. So how are you going to address that issue? And are there ways to alleviate that? Can you offer warranty services for devices that you're not even buying, but as a way, perhaps, to entice people to move this way? And then, of course, on that employee side or your customer side is that expectation of privacy, right? You and IT are typically worried about security. You know, where's my data? Who has it? Can I get it back? But the person who owns the device is also worried about the privacy on their side, so that if they move on to another department or to another company and you remove the data, that you don't take the baby pictures with them, right? Because those aren't yours. And they're very passionate about it. So that's one class of stakeholders that you have to consider in this journey, is the end user. I'll move over to the right is now the IT side, right? Is we still have to worry about security, we still have to worry about compliance. Those are by and large, the top two concerns relative to this initiative, security and compliance. But also now, how am I providing support? So what are the policies around if someone has their device? Is it a primary device or an alternate device? Is it the way they do primary computing, or is it complementary, right? Your support policies could be very different, if any, right? You have to decide. These are all choices that you have to walk through and determine. Access and infrastructure. You have a lot more devices, a lot more people trying to access things that you have behind your firewall, your own resources. So how are you doing identity management to make sure the right thing is going on? Your infrastructure, these three devices that I'm carrying on my person, they're all trying to hit your network. So do you have capacity? Do you need to consider guest networks? How are you going to separate your corporate from your agency network from the public network that you serve? And govern how you transition from one to the other on these variety. And then we shouldn't forget about software licensing and how that impact is, and you know, providing that to employees, yes, but on devices that you don't own, and what are the impacts there in the negotiations for that. So concerns on the IT side. And then, so the line of business owner, or the department that's trying to accomplish a piece of work, right, or have a relationship with a customer, or do something cheaper, better, faster, they're certainly concerned about security. They're concerned about managing their costs and improving their ROI, or ROV, I heard this morning, the return on votes, and I thought that was interesting. And discounts, right? Because so as you shift from a corporation providing devices and data plans, for example, to more of the consumer's going to bring that in, or an employee in this case, if you're going to expense it, you've lost a little bit of buying power there, right? So what's the impact to that in your decision to either have a stipend or reimburse or not? Or even other plans where it's corporate owned but personal enabled, which, you know, is more about, it's a corporate owned device, but I'm aggressively letting the employee do personal things with it, right? It's less about tightening it down, but more opening up what I can do, as long as I can keep the data and the applications distinct and separate. Just real quickly, I know the slides may be a little bit hard to read, but in addition to technology, I talked about this as a business model change. So on the left-hand side, we're talking about an increasing number of tablets on the left and in the green and blue, and smartphones on the right. And the blue is corporate liable, so corporate owned or agency owned, and the green is bring your own. So tablets, we're projecting it'll be more evenly split between agency or work provided versus bring your own. The smartphone's heavily weighted towards BYO, right? So these are predictions going forward. So it's not just, so now how do you deal with it from a policy standpoint of which kind of devices am I going to maybe provide or do a stipend or reimburse versus not? The story gets complex, right? And these are things that we have to walk through and study. And the right-hand side of the chart is all the different platforms that are out there, ranging from PCs and Microsoft and Intel to Apple to Android and a wide variety of form factors and devices. You see, it's just the wild, wild west here. And really the question is, what are the solutions out there that can help you insulate you in your work from that chaos out there, and let the person bring in, today I have a BlackBerry, tomorrow I have an iPhone, the day after that I have an Android device. And that's okay, right? And you self-service portals, how are you going to allow this to happen in a way that doesn't disrupt your IT environment, right? And the processes that you have, and be as minimally impactful to your existing process and standards as you do it. So applications. I was thrilled to hear him talking about in the keynote this morning about the growing number of applications provided in the state of California here. I think that it went from 4 or 5 times from last year, the number of applications that are available, because that's the game, right? That's the interface that you have. That's how you're going to provide better customer service. That's how you're going to do work cheaper, better, faster. And getting a handle on how you develop those apps, manage those apps, deploy those apps, update those apps is going to be critical in the success of these programs that you're going to roll out in the next 5 years. So the app is the new endpoint. I think you have to be able to focus on how you're going to deliver that capability. So now let's talk about benefits. We talked a lot about challenges and problems, but let's talk about some of the benefits of having a properly implemented BYO. From end user standpoint, we're seeing the flexible work environment, more productive employees, the line of business. We actually see some agencies and companies are using this as a recruiting tool. Right? Come work for us. We're very progressive. We're very modern, and you can bring the device that you like into work. And we're seeing this today being used even in recruiting. From an IT perspective, being able to know where your data is and who has it, and what they can do with it and what they can't, and very importantly, being able to extract it and bring it back home when that person no longer has a need to access it. All very critical and important when you do this the right way. The line of businesses are, like I said, the talent acquisition, and in private sector, it's about competitive advantage. I think in your business, it's about just having a better relationship with your end user, right? And how are you able to offer more services to a broader set of constituents with less effort and cost. Okay, so as you might expect, we have an opinion on how you should proceed with this. And from a prescriptive standpoint, the very first thing that you really have to do is define. Define all your policies. Have the arguments first, not later, right? What are you going to want your employees or your customers to do? Who gets to bring a device in? And sometimes it's okay to say no. At Dell, we actually have a 3-tiered policy where we have some devices that are provided, as a perk, a benefit to certain either customer-facing or executive level. We have a broad swath of folks who bring in their own personal device because it helps them be more productive in their work, and management approved that they could do that. And we have another set of category where, sorry, the answer is no. you don't have a need to use a smartphone to do the job that you're paid to do. So it's okay, but have those decisions, those discussions early on. And again, this is where you also bring up where it's not just all about technology. It's what's the culture of your organization going to be? What are the policies about security, of course? Everyone's going to talk about security. And is the email figuring out where you're going for lunch of the same confidential nature as the budget planning exercise that you're going through for the next 3 years? Right? So how are you classifying data? Do you need to classify data, or is sort of one stop fits all fine? Right? These are all the kinds of questions that you need to answer. It involves HR and legal. You know, there's not a lot of case law in this yet, you know, for if an hourly employee is checking email on the weekend, do you have to pay them overtime? You have to have a policy for that, right? That's how you work through this. You have to think of the questions, you have to have a policy for this so you don't get in trouble later. So do all the thinking and planning up front. It's critical important. In fact, we see the most successful customers and agencies that implement BYO don't do it just because it's BYO. They do it tied to another initiative. I need to reduce my brick and mortar space by 20%, for example. Now, BYO can be one element of that. You're going to have a lot of other elements to that initiative, right? HR initiatives, how are you going to move people out of coming into an office and working from home? Other tools and technologies to do teleconferencing and maybe soft, you know, VoIP type phones from a desk to offload cost, to bring your own devices fit into this. But we see far more companies are more successful implementing BYO when it's not just because I got one for my birthday and I want to use it to check email, or because the agency next door does it, I have to do it too. Tie it to an initiative, you'll be far more successful. That's an industry best practice that we talk about all the time. So define all the topics that are going to be of concern and work through the policies, and then you can decide the technologies that you need to roll those out. And the answer for this half of the room is going to be different from the answer for this half of the room, and that's okay, because it's all different. The next area is protect, of course. You have to protect. You have to secure the data, know where it is, and how to do that. The goal is empowerment, have your employees be more productive, have your customers be more engaged, and all this working on a foundation of how you can proceed from point A to point B. A little more detail on each one of these. So the define, again, some interesting things. The amount of data, this will feed into the next slide too when we talk about security, but the amount of data that's going to leak off of those devices and onto, you know, Facebook, right? If you don't have the right set of policies in place. Do you care? Sometimes you don't. If it's critical or confidential, you absolutely do care. And so how are you going to do that? Again, all the questions about support. Protect. So you want to deal with security in 4 clear areas. You need to embed security into your devices and platforms so that you know when that data at rest is secure, right? If you have a policy today that says all the data on my laptops needs to be encrypted, very common, right? Why would you not have that on your cell phones too? The answer can't be because it's hard. The answer needs to be I need to, so how am I going to go accomplish that, right? You need to protect that data in transit, not only at rest on the device, but in transit, so you have to make sure you have the appropriate controls set up there, typically with VPNs or other secure channels. You also need to be able to detect when there's an issue. So is that phone jailbroken? And if so, what are you going to do about it? You know, are you simply going to quarantine it? Or are you going to go try to fix it? Right? Maybe it's just out of revision in your malware. Wouldn't it be great if your network could detect that it was jailbroken or had a wrong revision of malware, and then you could automatically push the fix to it? again, without having to involve an IT interaction, because there's an automated process to fix that. And then when it happens, be able to respond. And it will happen, when you have a breach. And a lot of times it's not malicious. We see 1 out of 3 employees admit they're going to try to work around the system. Not because they're bad employees. They just want that next raise, that next promotion. They're trying to do their job, right? And even if, just like the water, the water heater story, if you don't know how to work around the system, you probably know somebody or on a social media network that could help you, right? So the knowledge is out there. People are doing it. How are you protecting your environment from breaches? And what are you going to do when it happens? Productivity, right? This is really the goal, right? Is how do you do more or better or cheaper or faster, however you measure, or a faster SLA, whatever it is that you measure, how can you do that better? And not just because you have an electronic leash, but because you can use that piece of plastic in your pocket of your purse to do your job differently, right? How do you make sure that the orderly in the hospital delivered the person to X-ray instead of obstetrics? How can you help the truck driver navigate better? How can you improve the quality of the data collection of that water plant with some automation on a device that has sensors attached to it? Right? It's not about doing the same thing just with a phone. It's doing, maybe working entirely different, because now you have new opportunities, new sensors, new technology at your fingertips that you didn't have before. So you got to check out the innovation section downstairs. You're going to see lots of really cool ideas of how these mobile products are being enabled to do things you couldn't have done 3 years ago or 5 years ago. And the sky's the limit. These little devices that we have in our pockets, they're advancing every single year. I mean, they're dual core, quad core this year. They're going to be virtualized in the near future. Right? These are little computers with all the capabilities, the ability to have sensors attached to them to do things for you, to sense your environment for you, to automate for you. So be thinking about how can you capture that? It's a whole new realm. And then very importantly is this foundation of where you're starting. Where are you today? Where do you want to go, and what are the prescriptive steps that you're going to take along the way, along that journey? Right? We have to be able to understand what the impacts are from a technology standpoint to my infrastructure. Very important. A lot of people overlook this. Am I going to let employees look at YouTube during the day on my network or not? There's ways you can stop it. And there's ways you can allow it. Do you need to be inspecting that packet data as it's coming across and making sure it's what your policy supplies? I think the answer is yes, right? Because it's your bandwidth, your network, you're paying for it. You get to decide the appropriate usage, and now how are you going to govern and implement and manage that, right? And with lots of devices trying to access that network, this is a very common situation that comes up. So don't, the infrastructure in your guest network and your corporate network have to be very tightly managed. A lot of times you don't know where to start. I've talked about a lot of things today that you may not have heard of. I hope I did, that you hadn't considered before. It's a new initiative. It's new topics. There's lots of things to consider, and every one of your situations is probably different. Where can you find those industry best practices? So if you don't have the resources at your disposal in-house to do this, reach out. There are companies that can help you with strategy consulting, analyzing where you are today, building out a prescriptive program. We do this, of course. But the very important part of this is you need to have your plan and how you're going to look at this from these broad perspectives. So once you have that, we build out a framework and typically talk about solutions in this space in one of 4 key areas. How are you managing the device and the user, right? What is John going to get to do? And does he get to do it on all of his devices or not? So how do you implement that kind of a policy? What if Mary can do something on campus but not remote? How are you going to create that environment? Because maybe it may be very sensitive. You may have data that you want to be able to access anywhere you are in the state of California, but if you're at that conference in China, you may not want to be accessing that data. So how do you protect that from happening, right? So very important on how are you managing the devices and managing those users who typically are now going to have multiple devices, and what's your policy across each one of them. Develop and modernize your applications. Who has tried to look at Outlook on a thing like this? You spend all your time panning and zooming and trying to figure out how to move the mouse with your finger, right? So a lot of the desktop apps don't directly transfer over to smaller form factors. So this means you typically are going to have a purpose-built app, a specialized app. You could have web pages that are mobile-enabled, right? Lots of technologies here. HTML5 is coming very fast and doing a lot of things. It doesn't do everything yet. It's an evolution of a standard. But which apps are you trying to get to? How do you know which ones you may have an idea of which ones you think you want your employees to get to, but which ones are they actually getting to? You should track that and figure it out. And then build a plan to mobilize and modernize those apps so that they're ready for a mobile form factor. Or a mobile, and form factor meaning size, but also the platform differences. Because you can do certain things on an iOS platform that you can't do on Android, and that you can or can't do on Microsoft 8, right? They're not the same. They have different capabilities. So how are you going to manage through that? Again, secure the data from the device to the data center at the edge of the network. Who has access to it? Are you going to want to be able to remotely wipe it? How are you going to make sure? What's your compliance policies? How do you know that when you initiated that wipe that it happened? So that you can report back to that person who's looking over your shoulder, right? And then infrastructure, right? Making sure you have the horsepower behind your infrastructure that you need. I've listed here a few of the products that we have in our portfolio to help. And I'm going to encourage you to go downstairs in the Solution Center. In the very front part of the area, you'll find a Dell booth, and we can actually give you demos of our case appliance. This is a very easy to install, easy to manage appliances to manage not only your PCs and your Macs and your servers, but also now your iOS and Android devices, right? So so you can go get demos of that downstairs. Very compelling. We have a lot of other solutions in our portfolio to address each of these focus areas. You also will see downstairs some of the devices now that we have that you can be providing to your employees, or that your customers will be bringing in and wanting to use. So go take a look at the latest and greatest of the and the PCs and the convertible ones. It's pretty cool. Some great technology down there. And if you need, you know who your contacts are. If you need to learn more about any of these other solutions in the area, we have Cheryl standing in the back. So if you need to talk to Cheryl, she'd be very happy to help you out with any of these other capabilities. So I think in closing, and I'll open up for questions, but the real thing that you should walk away with is, one, this is bigger than devices, right? It's not, I need to access my email with my iPad. As important as that is, that's a start. But it's really about, what do you want to do? What do you want your employees to do? What do you want your customers to do? And how are you going to enable that in a safe and secure way so that you can secure your IT environment, but free that user to do their job.